Sometimes a wrestling pay-per-view will surprise you. Maybe you had low expectations going in, or you were just flat out expecting to hate the event in question. And yet, you came away with it at least nodding somewhat cheerfully. The weeks of uninteresting build, those final thoughts of, do I really want to watch in the 72-hour run-up to the show? Those were all wiped out once you sat down and watched the talented individuals do what they do best in front of a frenzied crowd. It's quite nice when a pleasant surprise like that rears its head. But sometimes a pay-per-view has no chance at overcoming the ominous clouds that hover above. The event we're going to discuss today is the most prominent example of a show that was doomed well before arrival, and only a fraction of its failure had to do with bad creative. As it were, a horrifying incident and subsequent organisational response soured many on the show ahead of time. And to top it off, the actual event sucked too. The 2018 Crown Jewel is one of the worst shows ever. Twice a year, that familiar gripe from WWE fans begins kicking up. They can't believe WWE is running a show in Saudi Arabia. As recently as whatever the last Kingdom of Saudi Arabia pay-per-view was, you'll find much distaste and irritation archived on the social media channels regarding WWE's obscenely lucrative, albeit morally dubious, business dealings. Then, many of us complainers watch the show anyway. Hey, come on, Crown Jewel 2021 was a really good show. They had a Hell in a Cell match and everything. What, are we not supposed to be hypocrites? But we're not here to talk about the 2021 card. Instead, we're going to examine the original Crown Jewel, because with that show, match quality was the furthest thing from anyone's mind. In early 2018, WWE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia began a 10-year partnership in support of Saudi Vision 2030, the country's social and economic reform program. The first event of the co-op was the Greatest Royal Rumble, which took place on Friday, April 27th of that year in the city of Jeddah, and was headlined by a 50-man variation of the classic Royal Rumble match. Now, while the event itself was pretty okay from a wrestling standpoint, much of the analysis went towards some jarring particulars. There was an in-show video touting the country's social progress, which felt more like propaganda than anything genuinely uplifting. Additionally, no women were allowed to wrestle on the card, which seemed pretty backwards when juxtaposed with WWE's stated commitment to its women's evolution. The ever-diplomatic Triple H responded to that criticism by saying, "You have to understand that every culture is different, and just because you don't agree with a certain aspect of it, it doesn't mean it's not a relevant culture." Of course, it didn't take a genius to see the true motivating factor: cash, and lots of it. Wrestlers were offered unreal amounts of money to take part in this joint endeavour, just another example in a long and troubling history of sports washing, where a country uses pricey PR cooperatives to try and paint over the required reputation. For another example, as of the recording of this video, the Saudi-funded golf league LIV has lured away a number of prolific golfers, with some, like Phil Mickelson, signing staggering 9-figure contracts with the group. Golf legend Tiger Woods reportedly turned down a deal with LIV worth up to $800 million. Point being, unthinkable amounts of money go into endeavours like these, and wrestlers taking part in WWE Saudi events stand to earn big bucks for 2 long flights and a few minutes work. On September 18th, WWE announced their second Saudi collaboration, Crown Jewel, to take place Friday, November 2nd in the city of Riyadh. And with that announcement, the grumbling began once more. More propaganda, more dancing around the idea of women not wrestling on the show, and more of the same. Except the news cycle running up to Crown Jewel was anything but the same. Just 2 weeks following the event announcement, on Tuesday, October 2nd, Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi was executed in the Turkish capital of Istanbul by agents of the Saudi government. Khashoggi had entered the Saudi consulate to collect documents and never came back out. Khashoggi had been openly critical of the Saudi government, leading him to flee the country and enter self-exile approximately 1 year before his death. One of Khashoggi's prominent targets for criticism was Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the driving force behind Saudi Vision 2030. The same Saudi Vision 2030 biannual WWE productions we're now part of. US politicians from both sides of the aisle, including Democrat Senators Bob Menendez and Chris Murphy, as well as Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, tried to get WWE to end its deal with Saudi Arabia. Menendez had additional concerns due to Linda McMahon's close association with then-President Donald Trump, saying, because she is part of the president's cabinet, it falls into a grey area where the administration really should give it some thought and maybe even prevail upon WWE not doing it. And of course, WWE did it. You're watching this video, the video from our Worst Shows Ever series. Ergo, there was a show. On October 19th, the day that tickets went on sale, the Saudi government confirmed that Khashoggi had died on the grounds of their consulate. Briefly, WWE did remove ticketing information from its website before confirming 6 days later that Crown Jewel would still take place, citing contractual obligations. Now, Stephanie McMahon later defended the decision, saying, moving forward with Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia was an incredibly tough decision, given that heinous act. But at the end of the day, it's a business decision, and like a lot of other American companies, we decided that we're going to move forward with the event and deliver Crown Jewel for all of our fans in Saudi Arabia and around the world. Other WWE personalities defended the show going on as planned, including Randy Orton and JBL. Both of them offered the "we can't bring change if we don't go" line of thinking. JBL went further, equating Crown Jewel with the tribute to the troops shows of the past. Not sure exactly how that ties in, except that both events involve extensive travel, but whatever. Point being, WWE's decision to make the Crown Jewel booking had its vocal defenders. Now, it also had some quiet dissenters too. One of them was John Cena, who was scheduled to take part in an 8-man elimination tournament. Cena was establishing himself well as an actor and personality away from the ring, and apparently decided it wouldn't look too good to do Crown Jewel, so well, he obviously backed out. Daniel Bryan also refused to work Crown Jewel. He was scheduled to take part in the WWE title match, so that bout was simply moved to weekly television. And another major star reportedly refused to work the show, that being the Universal Champion Roman Reigns. Now, the big dog was scheduled to defend his title against Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman in a triple threat match, but months later, Fightful would later report that Reigns had told WWE officials that he didn't want to be on Crown Jewel. Reigns apparently informed WWE of his decision shortly before he received some rather startling news. For the second time in his life, Reigns was diagnosed with leukemia. After a tearful speech on the October 22nd Raw, Reigns abdicated the Universal title and went off to battle his illness. While major stars had serious reservations about the show, the majority of fans and critics were equally up in arms over WWE's refusal to back out, especially when all the TV and internet promotion for Crown Jewel simply omitted the event's location in one of the flimsier PR moves imaginable. Fans at the arenas reacted negatively to any in-show commercial for Crown Jewel, and when Michael Cole promoted the event during the all-women's Evolution pay-per-view, 11,000 fans at the Nassau Coliseum booed very loudly. God, with all this talk about business ethics, personal ethics, and political ramifications, it's got me a little hot under the collar. Well, I'm sure you knew there'd be some heavy subject matter when you clicked this video. You're probably expecting some cheap laughs and some objectively bad wrestling, right? Well, I thought so. So now's the time we're looking at this crappy card. There was a mention earlier of a tournament. Indeed, the first major attraction announced for Crown Jewel was an 8-man World Cup single elimination tournament. A World Cup held amidst lots of corruption. How did WWE not get Sepp Blatter to be the guest host? Not to worry, they found an equally disgraced individual to host. Hulk Hogan. 3 years after his well-publicised firing, the Hulkster was back with WWE, and Crown Jewel would mark his comeback appearance. Anyway, the tournament consisted of a respectable who's who of former and future world champions. Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, The Miz, Jeff Hardy, Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, Dolph Ziggler, and the semi-active Kurt Angle. In other words, a World Cup where all the participants were born in the United States. Meanwhile, Sheamus, Cesaro, Rusev, and Shinsuke Nakamura were all right there, working the exact same pay-per-view, but were not used. I mean, they couldn't even fly in eternal European champion D'Lo Brown from Helsinki to take part. For a little story flavour, it was decreed that if the SmackDown representative in the tournament final were to lose, they'd be fired by the blue brand shot caller Shane McMahon. So at least...
Fraser, stop right there. We knew exactly what was coming right at the start of the brand split on SmackDown. Daniel Bryan, Shane McMahon. It's all about the superstars. For the next year and a half, Shane McMahon made it all about him. Like Scrappy-Doo. He was like Scrappy-Doo, Fraser.
Regarding Sheamus and Cesaro, they had just won the SmackDown Tag Team titles from the New Day, so a rematch between the teams was scheduled for Crown Jewel. Also from the SmackDown side, WWE Champion AJ Styles would defend his title against Samoa Joe, marking approximately the 34th or 35th straight pay-per-view that they have faced off on. And with Reigns vacating the Universal title, Lesnar and Strowman were now scheduled to face off Monster v Monster for the vacant belt. Now that left quite an interesting main event. Sporting a combined age of 206 years, The Undertaker and Kane would face Triple H and Shawn Michaels, the Brothers of Destruction versus D-Generation X, to determine the most dominant duo of an era that ended about 8 Kid Rock albums ago. Now, a few words about this match. Number 1. It stemmed from Triple H defeating Undertaker in a 27-minute outing a month earlier in Melbourne, in a match billed as the last time ever, which came 6.5 years after their end of an era clash. Now, perhaps they'll wrestle in 2025 and it'll be called This Time It's Personal, or This Time Hunter's in Person. It's a talent relations joke because Triple H he's now the head of talent relations. 2. The match in question from Melbourne was slower than Orange Cassidy carrying a concrete slab up a hill. It was like watching Heroes of Wrestling with better production values, though the cameramen at Heroes did have a good sense not to shake their cameras up and down like they were mixing martinis. 3. The last time ever with partners match would include Kane, who at this point made Undertaker look like Rey Fenix from an agility standpoint, and adding Kane to the match wasn't going to help any. That'd be like if both your arms were too weak to lift a pair of dumbbells and your solution was to amputate one of them. 4. The best worker in the match was someone that hadn't wrestled in over 8 years and, let's face it, already had the perfect send-off. Shawn Michaels went out at WrestleMania 26 after a magnificent show-closing battle with The Undertaker. It was such an ideal ending that you could have framed it for viewing at the Louvre. So of course, he gets talked into returning at the age of 53 for the love of the game, and the reported 7-figure payday, obviously you can't forget that, that's his prerogative of course. You would just hope that this match could equal the brilliance of he and Taker from 8 years earlier. That's all. Shouldn't be too hard, it's just handcuff everyone but Shawn to the ring posts and send AJ Styles out there to work with him, and boom, you've got Kane's best match in years. And 5. While nostalgia is a vital part of all our nerdy hobbies these days, it has to be said how weird it was for these 4 to be main eventing a pay-per-view more than 21 years after Kane's debut, which came during a match in 1997 that all 4 of these men played some kind of role in. Can you imagine if in 1999 the WWF had a pay-per-view headlined with Bruno Sammartino and Bob Backlund taking on superstar Billy Graham and Ivan Koloff? Of course not. Because fans in 1999 were hipper to the stars of their day. If they wanted to watch enfeebled old-timers, WCW had plenty of them in their main event. Plus, that generation of fan didn't cling to the past like our member-berry chewing class tends to. Remember when these 4 could move gracefully? Oh yeah, I remember.
Remember TIE Fighters? Oh, remember Jawas? Remember?
So, getting past the sheer ugliness of the event's mere existence and the fact that it's even taking place, we're talking a World Cup filled with Americans, 2 title matches that we've seen before, another title match with a hasty change for understandable reasons, and the end of an era match. Please God, let this be the end. I guess there were worse ways to spend a Friday, remember? TNA used to be on Fridays, for example. But I'm not even sure TNA on its lowest, darkest, most incompetent, most dreadful, most Russo is a sleeper agent for WWE day could they have produced a show quite like this one. The commentary team for Crown Jewel consisted of Michael Cole, Corey Graves and Renee Young in a show of good faith. At one juncture it was rumoured that Young would have to wear a hijab while at ringside, but that wasn't the case. Somewhat contra to the stylish outfits she'd wear on Raw though, Young wore a sleeved black shirt with additional fabric to obscure parts of her hands. After a solid pre-show match in which Shinsuke Nakamura retained his US title over Rusev, the proper pay-per-view began, and for a while, it wasn't garbage. That really should have been the critical blurb on the network description. For a while, it wasn't garbage. Following a rather pointless Hogan appearance, the 8-man tournament began, and it was basically a Friday afternoon Raw for a bit. And up first, Mysterio defeated Orton after about 5.5 minutes with a roll-up, and earned a hearty post-match beating for his clean win. Now this set up the standard, will the babyface make it through his next match kind of thing. You know, that usual drama device, which is partially offset by the greater drama of the home viewer deciding what to just eat for lunch, or dinner depending on the time zone, because one positive of this match was us in the UK didn't have to stay up to all hours of the night, because that would have just been, yeah, horrific. After that, The Miz defeated Brother Nero via his patented The Stroke, but better after about 7 minutes. This was followed by Rollins outlasting Lashley with a curb stomp in about 5.5 minutes, and then Ziggler zigzagging his way past Angle in an 8-minute showing. So far, nothing soul-crushing or rage-inducing.
Nothing rage-inducing, Fraser! Let me tell you about the power of hindsight. Something you don't know about because you have the arrogance of youth. You are far too young to have lived a lot of life, to therefore have hindsight to look back on. But Shane McMahon was the worst.
He was the
worst. He was the worst. He was 55 years old. He was an MMA expert. He did a few judo classes. I could do a few judo classes. I'm not going to be an MMA expert.
This is the hindsight.
What?
This is the hindsight.
Whoa.
Anyway, the quarter-final round is kind of just there. Nothing you wouldn't see on your typical weekly TV show, except for maybe a rare match from Angle, who is nearing retirement. Nothing really past the 2-star range, but nothing really below it either. The decent action continued as the Bar retained the SmackDown Tag Team titles over the New Day in a 10.5-minute match. Again, another moderate level TV match, though nothing really approaching the lofty ceilings of any of the talented men that were involved. Then came the semi-final bouts. Miz squeaked past an injured Mysterio in 11 minutes, followed by Ziggler super-kicking Rollins en route to victory after 13. Both matches were a cut above the median so far, but still below the match of the year level, but really good middle of the card showcases. Styles and Joe followed with their WWE title match, a very good but all too brief collection of greatest hits from the two men that have made magic together in basically every promotion. A Styles phenomenal forearm ended the clash after just 11 minutes. So far we're talking 8 pay-per-view matches, the worst being no worse than a 2-star exhibition, the best being a 3.5-star match that would boost any show it took place on. Now, to the untrained eye, Crown Jewel's looking like a decent pay-per-view.
Shut your filthy whole mouth, Fraser! What are you talking about?
I know what.
It was a joke that went too far. Myself and Adam calling him the best professional wrestler in the world, and then they went and actually crowned him the best professional wrestler in the world.
I'm setting the stage. I know what I'm doing. It's my 3rd one by now. Anyway, maybe these matches don't wash out the sour taste of Crown Jewel's purpose and existence, but the wrestlers have all done well so far. Of course, there are still 3 matches left, but for this to be a bad show from a wrestling standpoint, pretty much all 3 of those matches have to be abysmal. And what are the odds of that happening, eh? Next up was the match to fill the Universal title vacancy between Lesnar and Strowman. Now, Baron Corbin was in there in his official capacity as Raw's GM. Now, this was just a month and a half before being sacked from that position. And since then, the McMahon family have put us in charge of the show. And I have to say, we have done a pretty horrible job, all things considered. Really, I don't know what we were thinking, sending Karrion Kross out there like an S&M shredder. Come on.
Does anybody have any idea about who or what this is?
But I digress. Lesnar and Strowman could be a pretty awesome match, seeing as both are freaks of nature and were half of that awesome SummerSlam 2017 main event, right? This could be a fun battle of super heavyweights. I spoke too soon. Corbin hit Strowman with a title belt. 1 F5. 2 F5s. 3 F5s. 4 F5s. Then 1 F5 to the outside. Strowman, he beats the count. Another F5, 5 F5s. So yeah, Lesnar wins in about 3 minutes after 5 F5s. Strowman flew halfway around the world for that. If not for the towering payday, this would have been the wrestling equivalent of, could this not have been an email? Alright, so we are subjected to one of the bad Lesnar matches where spam finishes run free through the boundless wild. At least it was short. The World Cup final was the semi-main event, an all-heel soiree pitting Ohio native against Ohio native, Ziggler from Raw and The Miz from SmackDown. I mean, they had the shockingly great match at No Mercy 2016. Could lightning strike twice? Clearly not, because it looks like The Miz got hurt before the match during that in-ring dust-up. Well, that obviously sucks. He's not going to be able to compete due to injury. So what happens? A forfeit win for Ziggler? Guess Raw's going to take home the trophy via the 2 sweetest words in English language. Default. But wait, hang on. Somebody's grandfather is trying to rush the ring. It's Shane O'Mac. What's Shane going to do? Wrestle Ziggler? What sense does that make?
I told you, Fraser! I told you! Shane McMahon ruins everything. Oh, yeah.
He was right. Shane enters into the match, thwarts everyone like a geriatric Superman, sheds enough sweat to create a nasty slipping hazard, and beats Ziggler in 2.5 minutes. He gets the trophy, and he dances around like a rainbow trout out of water. Here comes the money! And then there goes the last F I gave. It's Shane McMahon. Later that month, rumours began emerging that the son of the guy who owns the Jaguars was starting a new national wrestling company. I can't, for the life of me, figure out why they would have such a big audience on day one. Real head scratcher, that one. The 2 preceding matches didn't even go 6 minutes combined. But don't worry, the main event will go 4.5 times longer than that. Yes, you heard that right. They gave 28 minutes to 3 men that left their mobility scooters at customs and a 4th that hadn't wrestled since the turn of the decade. Now, it's awfully appropriate that this went on in the mid-afternoon stateside, because I hear that's when the early bird specials are served to the elderly. Well, you know, it might not be that bad. Give it time. Michaels is relatively ageless, despite it being positively jarring to see him bald. The one-time ladies' man now looks like Charlie Brown in leather chaps. Half expected him to superkick Lucy when she tried pulling the football away. So, while Michaels can still ably go, Hunter is not terrible at this stage of his career. He works within limitations of his age, he's smart as hell, and as long as he doesn't get injured, he should be able to carry his end. Phew, Hunter taking the Harley race bump in the corner at 49? What a trooper! He got injured. Yes, it turns out that the game tore his pec while swinging his body over the ropes to complete the corner bump. What followed was a very clunky, a very poor match that exposed the collective ravages of 4 WWE lifers. Though, in their defense, they may have been moving slowly because of the sweat puddles that Shane had just left on the mat minutes earlier. Don't need a slip and fall injury at their ages, you know? Though that doesn't explain how Kane and Undertaker failed to catch Shawn Michaels on a moonsault to the floor. It reminded me of many of the glitches from 2K20. It wouldn't be surprised to find out that this match served as a motion capture for that game. It definitely would explain a lot. Yeah, it would. Now, Shawn Michaels tried his best to mask the sheer ugliness of this match, but to no avail really. By this point, the mask had quite clearly fallen off. Quite literally. Kane's mask decided it had quite enough of this match and just flew off his head. The concluding pedigree on Kane was so butt ugly that it practically sounded the Matthew alarm. Yeah, Hunter was hurt, but it was still an apt ending to Crown Jewel. So concluded the first ever Crown Jewel. Really, the best thing you can say about the show was the flight home wasn't delayed. Sounds like a small praise, but just you wait. It was a show in 2018 that saw Helmsley, Michaels, Lesnar, Shane, Mysterio all win matches, while Undertaker, Kane, Angle, Orton and Jeff Hardy were all in action. Historians sometimes refer to this period as the Ruthless Aggression era. Naturally, reception was almost uniformly negative. Among 184 readers of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, 89% gave the show a thumbs down. The 8 people that went thumbs up are believed to experience some power outages after Styles pinned Joe. As of 2022, Crown Jewel's 0.97 weighted score is only one of 2 WWE pay-per-views with a score under 1. The other took place in the same country, and that story will probably be told another day. Crown Jewel went on to win Worst Major Show for 2018 in the Reader-Voted Observer Awards. Additionally, the business deal with Saudi Arabia won Most Disgusting Promotional Tactic, while the DX vs Brothers of Destruction match was voted Worst Match of the Year. Chris Jericho chimed in 2 years later, calling it the worst match he'd ever seen. And he was once booked on the same shows as the Kennel from Hell match and the 1998 War Games. Fans of WrestleCrap voted it the 2018 Gooker Award winner as the crappiest of crappy for the year. Getting the picture here? There was no love lost for Crown Jewel. If not as a pointless pay-per-view that motored along before descending into self-parody during the final hour, then as an event symbolic of commerce triumphing over art and taste simultaneously. Now, there are many reasons to feel a sense of shame towards...
Shane! Shane! You're on about Shane McMahon again!
Ross, I said shame. Shame, not Shane. M.
It's the same word, really, when you think of Shane McMahon.
He's
drowning in
he's
shame like he drowns in sweat.
Shame.
Carry on.
You see, that is how bad Crown Jewel was. Years have passed, and some of us just cannot forget, nor apparently forgive, its sheer hideousness.